Every August, I open a blank spreadsheet and I feel it. Not pressure exactly, more like possibility. The kind that's unique to franchise marketing. The money in that budget isn't mine. It isn't the company's exactly. It belongs to the brand. And our job is to spend it in a way that moves the needle for the franchisees who funded it. They wrote checks based on a percentage of every sale they made this year, and they handed that money to someone like me, someone with more marketing expertise than they have, trusting that I'll make better decisions with it than they could make on their own. That's not a small thing. And while I don't have to fight the CEO for more dollars, I can only spend what comes in. And that constraint, which sounds limiting, is actually one of the things I love most about franchise marketing. It forces clarity. It forces you to make a case. It forces you to look at your franchisees' numbers and ask, is this actually going to help them? I've made expensive mistakes. I've also walked into struggling brands, fought for the right priorities, and watched the numbers turn around. And I've sat across from franchisees who didn't trust how the brand fund was being used. And that distrust is corrosive. It will eat a franchise system from the inside. So, this season of the Franchise Marketing Spotlight, I wanted to start here with the budget, because everything else we talk about AI, media strategy, digital channels all of it lives or dies in that spreadsheet. Welcome to the Franchise Marketing Spotlight. I'm Catherine LeBlanc, fractional CMO and host of this podcast. This show is where franchise marketers get real about what's actually working, what's not, and what's keeping us up at night. Today, I'm talking with Adam Terranova, Senior Director of Marketing at Authority Brands, who oversees marketing across 5 home service trades brands, and Brooke Janousek, fractional CMO for IV Nutrition. Both of them have sat with more brand fund budgets than most people will see in a career, and both of them did something I think is worth paying attention to. They built frameworks. Adam uses the PESO model to organize every dollar he spends. Brooke runs a 60-30-10 split, 60% to what she knows works, 30% to what she wants to test, 10% contingency for whatever Google decides to do this week. Those frameworks aren't just budgeting tools, they're communication tools. When a franchisee asks, "Where is my money going?" a framework gives you an honest, defensible answer. And right now, with the pace of change in digital marketing, that kind of clarity is more important than ever. Let's get into it. Hey, we are talking about brand fund budgeting today, and I have
Yes.
Brooke Janousek and Adam Terranova with us today to get into the dirty details of budgeting. Before we jump into that discussion, though, I want Brooke and Adam to introduce themselves. So tell me, how many years have you been in franchising, and what are you working on right now? Adam, let's start with you.
Okay. I've been in franchising since 2013. More than a minute, I'll say, working with a bunch of initial brands. I'm working out. My current role is I am the Senior Director of Marketing at Authority Brands. I oversee the division of what we call the trades brands for the marketing function. They are 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning, Benjamin Franklin Plumbing, Mr. Sparky, Dry Medic, and Stop Restoration.
Awesome. Excited to chat with you and Brooke.
Yeah, my name is Brooke Janousek, and I have been in franchising for 10 years. And currently, I am a fractional CMO, and I'm the fractional CMO for IV Nutrition. So we have 47 locations with about 10 in development. So it's a IV therapy drip bar in the health and wellness space. And Adam, my background is very deep in home services. So you and I have a lot in common here.
Awesome.
Yes, and so I'm interested to hear because I haven't worked in home services yet. So I'm Catherine. I've been in franchising for the last 13 years, and I'm currently working as a fractional CMO as well. And I haven't had the pleasure of working in the home services brand. I've worked in some adjacent brands, but I'm excited to hear about how you guys approach brand fund budgeting because I'm coming more from the retail, brick and mortar, uh, lots of exposure in restaurants. So good. This will be a great conversation. But before we get to that, I want to ask you a quick fire question. So, what is the most expensive marketing mistake you've ever made? And I'll go first to set the stage. I was working at Smoothie King, and we were rolling out a pineapple mango smoothie promotion for the summer, and we called it Tropical Smoothie. And we printed all of our materials with the word tropical smoothie on it. And lo and behold, it launched, and we certainly got a cease and desist from Tropical Smoothie to say, you can't do that. And so I had to replace all of those materials. Luckily, I had gotten a lot of brownie points with my legal team throughout the years, but certainly was an expensive, embarrassing, and seemingly really simple mistake that I made. We all make them. How about you, Adam? What's a mistake that you made?
I would say I'll give you two. I think the most expensive mistake I ever made is the decision I didn't make to do something.
Okay.
But I'll give you a total opposite end of the spectrum as well. There was one time where we as marketers get so into like, I want to be the first one where marketers market to other marketers. And my
Yes.
CEO pulled me back and was just like, we have, if in the simplest of terms, do we have this? It's a yes or no question. I'm like, we do. Then why do we need all these other bells and whistles where we could just say we had this and move our resources into something else to move forward faster? So those were the two different ends of the spectrum as far as not having the confidence to go or
Yeah.
going too far in a technology piece where it's just like, but we have this. Why do we
Right.
need all the other bells and whistles? Don't
Yeah.
market to other marketers, market to the customer and make us money was the advice I was.
Right. Well, and that's the important thing, right? Is like who is the customer and how are you getting to them? Yeah. And is it other marketers?
Yeah. And I when I sit back and I reflect on it years afterwards, I'm like, that's the softest, best advice I've ever gotten in my life.
Yeah. 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 You need a little like reset every now and then.
I think we all do as marketers because we get too excited
Yeah,
sometimes.
I agree. How about you, Brooke?
Well, you probably saw me like rummaging around because I was thinking about what I was going to say, and I have a prop to even show now. So if
Okay.
people are watching this, they'll be able to see it. But
Yeah.
so this occurred in my 20s as well, early on in my career. And we were talking before we started recording that those are sometimes the early mistakes in your career is what really like catapults you forward. So I was working at an ad agency and we were sponsoring one of my clients was sponsoring a weekend for the University of Nebraska baseball team. So it was a highly attended event. We were very good at the time. So it was going to be a big series. We were playing Baylor. It was Mother's Day weekend. And we wanted to capitalize on the
Right.
bank's sponsorship of Husker Athletics.
Okay.
And so we said, okay, easy. It's going to be highly attended. It's going to be hot already. Let's pass
Mhm.
out something that's branded that is usable. And so we didn't want to do the fans. We didn't want to do bottled water. We thought sunscreen would be the best thing to hand out. And so we got the approval and the copywriter wrote a really clever line. The client rewrote it and the client wanted to say, protect your skin like we protect your assets. In theory, sounds great. So
Yeah.
I walk in to my office the couple days before the weekend series and my desk is covered in condoms. And I was like, who's the funny guy that put condoms all over my desk? And then I look closely and I'm like, no, 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 no. So the sunscreen packets look exactly like condoms.
My
And
God.
and in fact, because the first word is protect,
Protect.
it even makes it worse. So I was like, we absolutely cannot hand these out. It's a family event. And so I had to call the client and, explain what happened. And what happened was I didn't get a proof of the sample. Like I didn't get a sample. I
Yeah.
got a proof from the printer, but not the sample.
Right.
So
That
lesson
is an
learned.
important lesson.
Yeah.
I have learned that lesson so many times where it's like, it looks good on the screen, it's gonna be great,
Yep.
and then when you get it in person, it is not it's not what it was on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. So we
That
ended up
is
donating them
important.
to a dermatology clinic. So it was fine. But yeah, that
Especially
was
in
an
this
expensive
setting,
lesson.
right? Like, you're on
Yeah.
a college campus, you are like, the
Yeah.
context matters.
Yeah. So this
Yeah.
thing is worn down, like, funny, but this is like from 2000. So
Yeah. I love that it's a reminder that you keep on your desk of, like,
it
get
is.
the proof.
Yes.
All right, well, let's jump into our topic today, which is all around brand fund and brand fund budgeting. So our audience obviously is marketers. So Adam, you have permission to market to the marketers this time around. And, as franchise marketers, we are in a unique position. And I'll give a little background on what a brand fund is in case anyone listening is new to franchising or wants to learn more about franchising. But essentially, the way that franchise marketing is funded is through pooled dollars that the franchisee contributes, and it's called different things. It can be called an ad fund, a brand fund, national advertising fund. Sometimes we call it NAF. Lots of different words for it, but essentially, it's the funds that are pooled from your franchisees on usually a percentage basis. Sometimes it's a flat fee, and the marketing team uses those funds to then benefit the rest of the system. And so, I have a philosophy on it, and I get on my soapbox around what I think how brand funds should be used. But at the end of the day, the uses is outlined in your FDD. It outlines how much was spent on what on a percentage basis, and that is what brand or marketers use to then plan your budget. We don't get to go fight for more money from the CEO. We don't get to go, make a case for this awesome idea and show incremental value. It's a blessing and a curse in that the money is going to be there. It's not a, spend it or you lose it type of situation. But at the same time, we are kind of in the parameters of what is collected. So anyway, that's the background of a brand fund. Adam, I know you just had a great conversation at the Franchise Growth Conference around brand fund budgeting. So I want to get you started on kind of this discussion. And tell me, do you have a working philosophy or an approach that you take to brand fund budgeting?
I do, and I'll get through this here in a second. But Catherine, the biggest point that would want to make is what you just started at. It's how many things is it called? I have a very strong opinion. This was probably the first 5 minutes of our session. What is it called and why? You're calling it the brand fund, which aligns with the way I call it and how I refer to it as. If it's an advertising fund, think about the franchisees. How much advertising are you doing for me? And then think of the structure of there. So I really have a strong opinion. It's for the either brand fund or brand development fund, depending on, the situation. And it's a culture change when you come into different companies and it's a NAF and now it's a brand fund. So
Mhm.
really strong opinion on that one. Highly recommend everybody as marketers that's a franchise marketer on here refers to it as a brand fund. Brooke, what's
Mhm.
your opinion?
I agree 100%. You're fighting an uphill battle if you call it the National Advertising Fund because they're gonna nitpick, why is salary coming out of it? Why is this coming out of it? When it's like, hey, to your point, it's for the brand development. And how are we
Mhm.
getting our name out there at a national level to build the brand so that your local marketing is more effective?
Mhm. I actually when, I joined a brand and we were just starting franchise, we didn't have any franchise locations, and so I was able to be involved in the development of the materials that we were putting out to franchising, and that was a big conversation that my CEO at the time and I had around, "We are not calling it an ad fund, this is a brand fund because there are too many expectations on what ads are," and so exactly what you guys are saying, and so it sounds like our first takeaway tip is call it a brand fund if you can. And even if you can't kind of change the name and nomenclature in your contracts and your documentation, your words carry meaning. So calling it a brand fund as you're communicating to your franchisees what it's being spent on and how it's being used can help set expectations on what it's going to be used for. And so, Adam, you alluded to this, and I love this. It sounds like we're all going to agree. When you think about the brand fund, what are the priorities that you're trying to accomplish in those dollars?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So I want to bring it back a level. And it's about the philosophy of what it is we're trying to do. When you think about franchise marketing, there's really four key stakeholders in my mind. First one being the brand. How do we grow the brand? The next one, and the most important one, being the franchisee. The decisions we make benefit the franchisee. We also have ownership, whether it's a private equity, a founder led company. How much, how's that affect the finance piece of it? But everything really also comes back to the FDD or the franchise disclosure document. So it really is a philosophy with four masters, is the way I view it and my experience in there has come. But the way I really do it is I take it back to automobile or car dealerships, tier one advertising. You're building the brand. Think about the commercial we've probably all heard, built Ford tough. They don't mention the model. They don't mention, a dealership or anything like that. So that to me is really the philosophy of the brand fund. How do you build the brand to be, think, built for tough? And then tier three, which is the most important part to the franchisee, which is that local selling. We've probably all have a car dealership that's like, you have a job, you get a car, financing available, this dollar, this rate, elements like that to come through. And then the last one, which is the last evolution one, is regional marketing or a really good co-op. It might have 4, 5, 6, 10 franchisees in one DMA or designated marketing area that can pool their dollars together and they all offer the same promotion. A great example that I've grew up learning is the 1999 oil change. Are you making money? No, probably not. You're covering your costs. But the key is you got that person into the dealership, you had the first experience, and now you have their information to email market, to call out market, and hopefully they live within your area.
I think, Adam, what you're setting up is exactly how I've described franchise marketing in the past as well. As you know, and I usually use a bullseye, right? So your biggest circle is going to be your brand, then your regional fund, and then the bullseye is going to be your local. And a lot of times brands don't have that regional layer, and so you just have two, and that's okay too. Brooke, when you're explaining the brand fund, is that kind of those layers is how you're looking at it, where brand is how are we getting the word out about the brand, and then local is really about that local offer, that local call to action.
Yes, exactly. And I want to go to something that Adam said. You have stakeholders, different stakeholders that need to understand the brand fund, but at the end of the day, my litmus test and above all, I make decisions on what's going to benefit the franchisee. And so sometimes, and this goes back to what we said at the top of the conversation, why we call it a brand fund, because sometimes the decisions I've made have been review solicitation, like we're paying for the review solicitation platform. Right now we're
Mhm.
paying for the AI agent to be on the site. Those are things that I fundamentally believe will benefit the franchisee because it's helping enable conversations at scale. It's helping solicit reviews. It's not just advertising. But when I look at, hey, am I actually going to spend some money on actual advertising? Yes, it's at the brand level, at the national level. We're probably doing CTV or something like that. And maybe purchasing one zip code or two zip codes in their
Mhm.
areas so that it can get the name out so that then when they're doing lower funnel tactics, they don't have to work as hard because the brand name has already been out there.
Well, and tell me more about how you are thinking about, so in the fractional space, a lot of times we're working with brands who are up and coming.
Yes.
They're not at, the 500 to 1,000 location. And so the brand fund is not necessarily stable in that it changes every single year because of the number of locations that you're adding, and it's starting out pretty small. And so when you're talking about review solicitations, you're talking about the having an AI agent on your website. Those are expenses. I would say that, you know, kind of go into the bucket where any small business is going to invest in these, but because you're with a franchise, those pool that you're pooling your dollars into the brand fund so that it is not as taxing on your bottom line as it could be. And so
Right.
when you're working with those smaller budgets, are you thinking about, how are you building efficiencies in the marketing spend before you're thinking about brand? Tell me more about how you work those two in a small budget.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I guess I'm drawing on my experiences from full-time CMO
Yeah.
when I was doing those things, and the current role I'm in, we're a little bit bigger. I mean, we have, the 40 plus locations, so I have a little bit more to work
Hmm.
with. But for my experience with brands that were emerging, that were just starting, I mean, it was literally like, unfortunately, there's not much to like, you can't do much with
Right.
that. And so we kind of said, hey, we're gonna hold on. So when I was at Hello Garage when we started, we were collecting the brand fund, but we said we have to get to a certain amount before we can even do anything. And the franchisees
Right.
understood that, but then they wanted
Mhm.
to know what's your plan. And so at the
Right.
time, now this is several years ago, but I was like, okay, we're gonna do a national TV spot. So that was what we were gonna do once we hit a threshold. So it was kind of like they were watching the pot grow, and when we got to that certain point,
Okay.
then we were gonna do that. But yeah, we would just collect, and we said, for the first couple years we're probably not going to draw from it because
Hmm.
there's not enough to do anything effectively.
Yeah. Well, and so I've been at brands where the AUV was pretty low, and so even though we had a lot of locations, the brand fund wasn't necessarily in a spot where CTV wasn't really hot at that time.
Yeah.
there wasn't a whole lot of spend that I could do on the behalf of the franchisees that would have an impact. And so instead, I took the approach of what is the franchisee spending on marketing and how can I bring it all up to the brand fund so that their local dollars can be increased, which, in my opinion, if I got these 200 locations to increase their local spend by 50%, then we were going to start feeling like a national brand because through the brand fund, I could create consistency and creative, drive that consistency and creative down to the local level. And then the local dollars could feel bigger because they were bigger because I was pulling up things like email marketing, creative development, that kind of thing up into the brand fund. And so it's interesting your that approach around because when you're starting a brand fund, you got to have something that they're looking forward to. And so it's interesting that you said like, okay, well, let's do a national TV campaign because that's the first thing franchisees want to do with a brand
Yeah.
fund. And I hate that question because you can't buy national TV at an efficient rate. But now
Yeah.
through CTV, it is a little
Yeah.
bit more approachable. Adam, have you ever started a brand fund?
We have. A couple of brands I've worked at in other holding companies, we definitely have. And one approach we took was a little bit different than what Brooke recommended was we had the brand fund, but we also had the technology fee. The technology fee was everything that was we could do from a collective bargaining piece, right? Where instead of like the what I call the traditional franchise per location per month, it's hey, it's this much divided every month. Anything we could do from a collective bargaining standpoint for things like review management, SMS platforms, fees, right? Not usage fees, just like those cost of opening a business piece of it. And then in other brands, we've rolled it into the brand fund as they got to a certain point. So they're still getting a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? Whether it be
Mhm.
exposure and then cost on, savings on technology related things that are so important to, reputation management, for example. So important to
Mhm.
franchisees, especially now.
What are some of the, like, must-haves that because I've gotten into these conversations with what should the franchisee carry versus what should the brand carry? And so and there's just limited budget all around, right? There's only so much you can ask the franchisee to spend. There's only so much we can spend through the brand fund. Reputation management, location listings is something that I wrestle with, especially in the beginnings of a brand fund because it's so expensive, but it's also so necessary. So are there any, like, must-haves? It's so important that the franchisee has this, so I'm gonna put this in the brand fund for you.
The way I look at it and how I try to organize it is actually something that I learned at the Franchise Growth Conference way back when. It's the PESO method. My mind, and I put this in the FDDs as much as I can, paid advertising. That's, as Brooke was saying, that's what franchisees want to see as much as possible going out. Earned advertising. This is your PR, relations, and what are results are you getting off of earned? Shared media. That's your social media. Creative kind of falls somewhere in between all three, but owned assets. That's your website. That's your reputation management, and so many other features coming through there. I usually start with how do I get my house in line with our owned assets? And once I start doing that, that's where I'm able to work my way upwards towards the paid advertising, right? Because paid advertising can be expensive. Or if you do PR the right way, you can get earned advertising and then you grow your way up the ladder in between there.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and I think, we all kind of look at that paid earn social organic like we know the construct of that. When it comes to brand fund, is there anything that you say, okay, this must be in the brand fund?
Yes, and that's usually in my owned assets bucket that's in
Okay.
there.
Yep.
Every brand needs a website, right? I don't have a
Mhm.
choice on that one. Email marketing's a good one. Listings, reputation management are phenomenal ones that the brands have to have.
Mhm.
Other elements such as a coordinated scheduling or posting for social media, that's a nice
Okay.
to have. That comes
Yeah.
next. In my mind, it's all
Mhm.
about reach, frequency, and remember, tier one is building the assets that franchisees can use and
Yes.
go through.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of time in newer brands, you're only working with your own bucket as that comes through. In my
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that's been my experience too and one of the reasons I'm passionate about it is because I saw the impact that brand I was talking about earlier where we said, "Okay, We can't spend on your behalf, but we can create consistent brand materials for you to use in your spend and the impact that that consistency had on their business. Brooke,
Yeah.
are you aligned with Adam as far as those are the must-haves in the brand fund, or is there anything that you would add?
Yeah, I agree with the website, so the hosting and all of that. And what I have found too is now there's so many great partners that offer reputation management and listings
Mhm,
in one. So you don't
mhm,
necessarily have to
mhm,
go find one or find the other. So if you can bundle that price, you get a better price. So that's usually the second thing that I would go for. And then I'm going to throw a hot take. I really do think these AI agents would be like
mhm.
the next one. I agree. Like the Hootsuites of the world, like that's a nice to have. Like, and you know what? Even the franchisor can just pay for that, like if you really need to, but rather than having that come out of the brand fund. But the AI agents that we've implemented are so critical at having those conversations at scale, and the insights that we're gaining to create content for our own channels cannot be. You can't put a price tag on it. So that would be like the next thing that I would add.
Well, Brooke, I wanna dig into that a little bit because, and especially with your experience, your both of your experiences in home service brands, when we think about the website and we think about so now we have SEO and GEO. Now they're similar, but there are some differences. Brooke, you just mentioned some, bells and whistles you can add to the website, like an agent, like, there's probably opportunities. I guess my question is, what does the franchisor hold responsible versus the franchisee? Because there are thought leaders out there that believe a robust website is the answer to leads.
Mhm.
I think that there's some brand building and this brand building drives to the website, and so that's a better place for you to spend your dollars. But I've also understand that SEO and GEO are so fundamentally important to the discoverability of the organization. Where I get tripped up is I have a limited budget, so I only want to spend X amount on SEO, GEO, and it's not 50% of my ad budget. And then the franchisee wants more being done. How do you guys manage kind of that web presence and who spends what on and on what?
Yeah, that's a great question. So much is changing to your point. When I was at Garage Experts, we out of the brand fund, we paid for the national SEO package, and then the franchisees had an opportunity to do a local SEO package. So the
Mhm,
partner we were using offered local SEO with their SEM, and it was an add-on. And so I would always
mhm,
encourage the franchisees, you should still do this local piece because it's really critical for discoverability. Currently at IV Nutrition, we're just paying for SEO out of the brand fund. So
mhm.
I think it kind of depends on how you're set up and your preference, but I just felt like it was a 1-2 punch. We were doing at Garage Experts, we did the national, and then the local ones could come in and add on. And the ones that did do that add on, I mean, they saw increase in traffic and leads for sure.
Well, so that's where I get hung up, right? Because and I've gotten into a disagreement with, my opinion. If it's going to increase discoverability in those leads, then it should be something that we cover out of the brand fund. But then, later in my career, after I had that disagreement, I got into a situation where the brand fund was being eaten up by all of the work that we had to do on the website,
I
and so that really
know.
limited us on what else we needed to do. And so I kind of
Yeah.
backtracked around my thinking.
Yeah.
And it and, and so I'm always interested into how
Yeah.
other people approach it.
Well, and it's crazy because I mean, it's only been 9 months since I was at Garage Experts, and 9 months, so much has changed. And
Yes.
so much has changed in this landscape that it just, makes your head spin
Mhm.
that now I am all in on the franchisor paying for that national SEO and then this AI agent because we're gleaning the insights that feeds the content that is
Mhm.
definitely benefiting. And then I have the franchisees spending a little bit more on top of funnel, and we're seeing through the
Yes.
reporting that a lot of our traffic is coming from Facebook, so which is top of funnel, and then
That's
they're
right.
having
Mhm.
conversations with the agent and then they're converting. So then I
Mhm.
can go back to
Mhm.
the franchisee and say, "Look, I know you say that Facebook isn't working, but here is the evidence." Like it drove to
Mhm.
the site,
Yeah.
then they had a conversation and then they booked an appointment. Facebook's not going to take credit for that, but it drove the traffic to the
Yeah.
site.
Well, and I think it's interesting too, and I guess that's where my struggle comes from as far as investment in top of funnel versus investment in SEO, because both should pay off almost equally in the moment. Long term, brand is going to pay off because you're going to be building that affinity. And so that's something I constantly battle with. Adam, how about you? Is it something that you wrestle with?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it's the frequency that you can get from a brand from brand spots is going to be the hardest part. But I'm going to go back a couple things because if I had a great image of a pendulum, so many things are combining. Brooke was talking about like, hey, now you can bundle things and put them together. Every
Mhm.
7 or 10 years, in my experience, it's just like, hey, we bundle things or we break things apart.
That's
Then
right.
we bundle it again, then we break things apart, right? So right now we're in that, let's combine it for efficiency's sake. Cause I think the technology piece of it is flattened out enough where it's just like now it's financially and performance based efficient to be able to do that. So I think that's a great, takeaway. Look at how much can you combine from these vendors? Cause right now so many are so close in what they offer
Mhm.
from a pricing standpoint. The other piece I wanted to go back and talk about, the Google pendulum, I'll call it, right? And this leads into the SEO, AEO, GEO conversation, as it goes through with national or local SEO. Google's changed a lot in the last, gosh, 5 or 6 weeks now. So a lot more. And my franchisees were like, spend everything on as much as you need to on getting the website right. Because once the
Mhm.
website's right, that's organic leads, right? So think of
Mhm.
it in a
Yep.
different way. Like SEO is organic leads coming in. And if I can protect that and grow that and, work in those ways, that's ultimately making that brand fund contribution work for them. To your latter point, as
Mhm.
far as like brand paid dollars versus website dollars, at the end of the day, it's organic leads. How are we going to
Mhm.
manage the
How are you
organic?
driving those organic leads? Yeah. And so what are franchisees asking you to do with the brand fund right now?
It's great leading question, right? Because it's coming into what's going on with SEO, GEO, AEO, national versus local, and
Mhm.
elements like that. And I'm going to lead with, I'm going to say it this way. The script's already been written. Think about how Google launched 10, 15, 20 years ago and how they started out. And you think about it, and this is another pendulum things, right? When Google first launched, it was all about the brand, not like ChatGPT and other elements. What is it? It's all about the brand inside, the LLMs. How strong is the brand, the authority score of that website? So it's
Mm.
really about that. And then in time, it'll come back and it'll go a little bit more hyper local, just how Google was. And I feel like right now
Mhm.
it's back a little bit, kind of leaning up towards priority towards the brand. Um,
Mhm.
through there, and a lot of franchisees can understand that because they've lived through the evolution of Google with where we're at
Mhm.
now. And that's inside the LLMs. And as we look at that, how do we win within the LLMs is the number one priority in between there. And we'll talk about national SEO and how important that is, especially with all the updates over the last like 6 weeks or so, content wise, EEATS, elements like that we have to really, as marketers, just pay attention to. Google is
Yeah.
still the biggest one out there.
Well, and so I like how you kind of said, okay, my franchisees are asking me for SEO investment, but what they're really asking for is to drive organic leads. And so
100.
when you think about that reframe, do you start thinking a little bit more globally outside of SEO GEO, or is that a way to say, okay, this is how I measure if this is working?
It allows me the opportunity to think broader and then
Mhm.
also get ahead of it, right? So that's where like
Mhm.
kudos to the franchisees for being like, we want to win in all these LLMs that are out there. We want to win in website. They just, at the end of the day, they're giving us a percentage of sales, for to win organically and generate
Mhm.
leads for it that
Mhm.
way. As
Yeah.
you said, that's what's most important to them. Because if they can convert them, that's where they're making the dollars at.
Right. And so when you guys are developing your brand funds, what have you seen the most success as far as how you solicit feedback from the franchisees, incorporate that feedback, and then report it out? Brooke, I know that you've worked with multiple brands, and so
Yeah.
you probably have an opinion on kind of this is how I like to run that budgeting process.
Yeah. So I'll answer this and then I want to go back to something Adam said. and give an example too. But from a budgeting perspective, like I've walked into scenarios where there wasn't very much order set to it. And so the franchisees were very like, where is this being spent? And so really getting that cadence down as a marketer of how are you reporting out? We would report out, we got on a cadence at Garage Experts quarterly, and we would report to the FAC first and then allow
Mhm.
them to poke holes or ask questions, and then we would, send it out to the system. But getting on a regular cadence, getting that, looking under the hood, sitting down with your CFO saying, this is, what's the balance? Here's what I have. Like, what can I work with this year? What can I maybe like hold on to and plan for next year at Garage Experts? We were running pretty all the way down to the bottom, and then it would replenish again the next year. And so I kind of had that in mind. And the year before we had a balance. And so it was nice that I kind of had something to carry
Mhm.
over.
Yeah.
So I think just really understanding first and foremost, sit down with the CFO. What do we have to work with? What's coming in? And then we would also forecast, okay, we know this many locations are coming on board. So by the end of the year, your fund will actually be this. But
Mhm.
I was always careful not to spend it until I knew that that new
I know, I
location
was so
opened.
conservative. Yeah, I'm
Yes.
always so conservative, like, don't even tell
Yes.
me the new stores, that'll just be lagniappe money that I can spend in 4th quarter.
Yeah, exactly. I would just kind of know that that would be a nice little bonus, and then I could, like, juice it at the end, but it was just nice to know what was coming down the line.
Mhm.
And if I may take a step back to something that you asked, like what the franchisees are asking for
Mhm.
it to be spent on, I agree right now everyone is asking me, how do we show up in the LLMs? And one thing I will say that very practical that someone could take away and go implement tomorrow if they wanted is the LLMs are not just scraping your website, they're scraping every platform out there. And so while we can't always control the earned side of things, we can control our own channels. And so what I have done is I took all of the FAQs that have been asked on our site right now with the agent, then took those questions. I encouraged the franchisees to create 30-second videos that answered those questions. So now we have FAQs on our websites. We have links to YouTube shorts with the franchisees answering the questions. I'm telling the franchisees to also post on their social channels. And then
Mhm.
now we have videos that you can use for demand. So now we
Mhm.
are owning our YouTube, our Instagram, our Facebook channels, our website, and then we put it on paid. And so now you're getting like, 5 different places for the
Mhm.
LLMs to cite versus one. So that is another thing. So when they ask me, what are you doing with this AI agent? I'm like, hey, here's what we did, and this is how it's benefiting us from an LLM perspective.
Well, and how do you get your franchisees to answer those questions on camera? Is it already a kind of social forward group?
Yeah, yeah. Now, there's some that don't want to do it, and so that's fine. I say, hey, have your clinic directors or
Yeah.
somebody else do it. You, as the owner, don't have to do it, but
Mhm.
people want the authentic, real,
Yes.
local person on camera. They don't want to hear from our founders. They want to know who is running the Fort Worth clinic, who is running the Des Moines, Iowa clinic. Like, you
Mhm.
should be on camera because that's who they're going to see when they walk into the clinic on Tuesday for their
Mhm.
appointment.
Yeah. What are you guys excited about in 2027 that you're gonna add to your budgets?
I don't even know what's coming next week out of Google.
Stop.
It's just like I don't know what it will come. But I will say, you know, to go back to your original questions from a franchisees and management of the fund comes down to one word: trust. Can they
Mhm.
trust you? And are you, leading them and also following them in the vision that they want? Going back to, it's simple to understand. It's easy to get alignment. You can easy to create a shared vision, but you can also give the visibility back in end of year report outs, quarters, pieces. Ultimately gives trust, and it the PESO method in my mind
Mhm.
allows us as marketers to be adaptable and speed to get things done. So those
Mhm.
were like my key takeaways coming from there of how I work with the franchisees. And I've worked with startup brands, probably about 20 something brands I've worked with so far
Okay.
coming through there.
Yeah. What about you, Brooke? Is anything exciting getting added onto your brand funds for next year?
Not yet, I will say, because so much is changing. I have no idea what the heck's going to happen
Yeah.
next month. So I think right now, just kind of holding steady, and we'll see what changes. October is when I'm going to have to really submit a budget. So we'll see what shakes out here in the next couple months. But still, the foundational things, I think I'll still budget for SEO and GEO, some flavor of that for sure, and then kind of figure out what's the nice to have that, as we
Mhm.
add more locations, what would be a nice to have that I can forecast for next year, but who the heck knows what's coming down the what Google's gonna do.
Well, and so tell me more, how have you guys approached your budgeting knowing that the unknowns look, and you guys have said it, the last 18 months have been the most disruptive that I've ever seen in my career, and I came up through the launch of social media, the launch of digital advertising, the launch of AI, and the changes that Google has made and Facebook have made to their advertising platforms have been the most disruptive, I think, in my career. And so it is hard to navigate. You have a budget at the beginning of the year that's all laid out and pretty until real life hits. And so, Brooke, for example, your AI agent, right? These are things that when you hear about it, and we all know the last 2 years, a lead acquisition has been very difficult. And so we are constantly chasing how are we going to fix the short term while investing in the long term. Have you guys thought about saving for the unknown, or is it more like, okay, I'm gonna have to take from over here to pay for over there?
Yeah, I kind of follow the same principle that I teach the franchisees from a budgeting perspective. So, let's put 60% into tried and true things that we know are always going to work. And then let's reserve 30% for those next opportunities that we want to do. And then 10% contingency for like the things that you didn't know was going to
Okay.
come up. But
Yeah.
great, now it's here and now I want to try it. And thank goodness I saved some of that money for that. So that's kind of how I look at it, and just knowing, okay, what worked this last year? These are the tried and true foundational things. I know 60% at least of my budget's going to go towards that. And then what's like
Okay.
ooh, now like other people have tried this and I've seen it work and I'm intrigued enough that I think we're going to dip our toe in the water and then I'll have that contingency piece.
I like that. I like that framework. Adam, do you have a framework?
I do. Budget in as biggest a bucket as possible to allow you most flexibility, right?
Mhm.
Like, what's the website, SEO, GEO, all is one bucket. So I can move within that bucket as easily as possible.
Okay.
And then also to the other piece that I'll say, so that way I'm not moving from, over bucket to bucket, but again, my buckets are PESO. So if it's in the own bucket, and then for website SEO, I'll probably will break that one down a little bit to a big piece of it. But one other piece, and because this is for marketers, we're talking so much about digital and Google and stuff like that. Don't forget how to market outside of digital channels.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think that the key piece that a lot of people, and spending more money on Google is not, it's great. It can get results, but remember how to develop business outside of Google.
Well, and I think that's why I was pushing too on like the SEO, GEO, the ask from the franchisees, right? Because the franchisees, these are dollars that need to benefit them and they need to be bought in on the effectiveness of the dollars. And so it's important to get their feedback and say, what do you think? What do you think is missing or gaps in our current marketing strategy? But to your point, when they say I'm missing LLMs and SEO, what they really mean is I need to make sure that my organic lead pipeline is going to be secure. And so how are we going to approach that? And so when you're thinking about kind of the non-digital pieces, what pieces of non-digital are in your current budget?
We'll do CTV and a lot. We'll do some radio in selected markets at different times, but it's the message in the medium, but also the time of year. Where are we going to advertise? How are we going to do it? And so it's a combination of those three factors, but we'll do some print, we'll do some direct mail at the brand level. We recommend it gets done at the tier 3 level on a pretty consistent basis, but it's more to support and do the other pieces, with franchisees.
Yeah.
And we have a org structure where it's just like we have a national brand agency, and then we have a couple of local media placement companies, some local SEO, SEM companies that we'll work through from just a
Okay.
size and scale piece of it.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to wrap us up with one final question. What's the one thing you tell a franchise marketing team to stop doing right now?
Stop trying to predict what's going to happen next. It's
That's a great one, Brooke.
yeah, it's like personally I have tried I like will drive myself crazy trying to figure out what's going to happen next and I just have to be like never in my life have I had to just roll with the punches so much as I do right now. Like, and
Mhm.
it's painful, but that's where you grow. And so I'm finding that like just sitting back and being like, it is what it is. Like things keep changing and tomorrow it's going to be different. And so all the best we can do is pivot and be flexible, and because everybody's in the same boat. That's what I take comfort
Yes.
in, is I'm not the only one in
Mhm.
this boat.
Yes, for sure. You
Uh,
are not the
uh,
only one, and you have a you have a marketing community that is beating their heads against the wall with you.
Yes.
Adam,
yeah,
what would you say?
I would echo it. And the reason being is live in the moment, but be flexible. Because like we're talking about budgeting and budgeting for 27, flexibility is what's going to be the key for success. Those that can be more flexible and adapt to what's coming is who's going to win in the future. If we're stringent like corporate, nope, this is what it is, but again, it comes back to the word trust. And what are we
Mm,
trying to do
yeah,
to show
yeah.
vision?
I think that makes sense. Well, thank you guys for joining me today for the Franchise Marketing Spotlight and talking about all things brand fun budgeting. It was a pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Catherine.
Kevin.